Tonight we're in Cambridge, and welcome to Question Time. A big welcome, as always, to our audience here in Cambridge, here to ask questions and to argue with our panel, and, of course, to our panel who do not know the questions in advance of them being put. The Liberal Democrat Business Minister, Jo Swinson. Labour's Diane Abbott, who may be free to speak her mind even more than usual after being sacked by Ed Miliband from his front bench earlier this week. The Conservative MP, who's challenging his party leader David Cameron to call an early referendum on the EU, Adam Afriyie. The Times columnist, Matthew Parris, and Sarah Churchwell, who's Professor of American Literature at the University of East Anglia. Thank you very much. Well, a big welcome to you all. And a first question, please, from Oliver Richardson. Oliver Richardson.
With today's 8% rise in energy bills, is it now time for a price freeze?
Is it time now for a price freeze, as Ed Miliband was suggesting? Jo Swinson.
Well, I understand why that seems so attractive, because at the end of the day, people are finding it really tough at the moment to balance household budgets, and it just feels sometimes like energy bills just keep going through the roof. But I don't think that Ed Miliband has identified the right solution to this problem, and there's a few reasons why that is the case. I think, first of all...
Can you give the main one?
Yeah, if you announce a price freeze, and you say this is going to happen in 18 months' time, what you get is the energy companies that will hike up their prices before that actually happens.
Perhaps they think he's going to win the next election, and they're hiking them up already.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could say that that's partly it, but that is something which doesn't actually, therefore, get you the ultimate goal that you were aiming for. But the other thing is this: we have an energy market which is, I think, quite dysfunctional, and that was created, in fact, when Ed Miliband himself was the energy secretary, and in fact it allowed the big six to thrive. More than 90% of people are with one of the big six companies, and that lack of competition is not good. But Ed Miliband's plans would make that worse, because what are the types of companies that would manage to withstand the 20 months of the price freeze? It would be those that had already built up fat profits. It would be those big six. The ones that it would really hurt would be the smaller companies that we need to provide competition to those larger operators. They would be much more likely to go bust and go out of the market, leaving us with an entrenched big six, which is the opposite from the direction that we need to be going to get better deals for consumers.
I said it as a joke, but do you think there's a possibility that these prices are being hiked now because of what Ed Miliband said about a freeze if Labour came to office?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons why we are seeing...
do you think specifically that?
I think that there are wholesale rises in energy prices
but
globally.
Do you think Miliband's statement has got anything to do with it?
I think that it could well have an impact. I think ultimately, if you're in the energy market and you see that that has been announced by one of the major political parties, that could factor into your calculations, and that is unhelpful.
Thank you. Diane Abbott.
Jo seems to have been taken in by these big energy companies saying, oh, if the prices are frozen, you know, the lights will go out, we'll go bankrupt. The truth is, it's a rigged market, and the energy companies have been making hay with it for far too long. They put up their price, I think, less than 12 months ago. Now this company is talking about an 8% rise, and they will all follow on. Of course, if it was a genuine market, you wouldn't need any intervention. But it's a rigged and dysfunctional market. And what we're saying is we freeze prices for 2 years while we sort out the regulation, we sort out the market. These price rises are very serious for ordinary people, Jo. There will be old people who have difficulty finding the money to heat their homes this winter. And for the government just to wring its hands and criticise Ed Miliband, the government doesn't have a practical proposal which will make energy affordable for people, particularly in East Anglia, which I know can get very cold in the winter, who are going to have difficulty heating their homes. Wringing your hands is not enough. We believe in markets, but we believe in genuine markets. This is a dysfunctional market, and the real problem is the huge profit margin which the energy companies...
So you think they should freeze, this government should freeze things now?
Well, they won't do it, but that's what they should do, and we will certainly do it when we win in 2015.
A number of people with their hands up, and I'll come to you in a second. Before I do, Matthew Parris.
David, alone on the panel, you and I are old enough to remember the price freezes in the 1970s. Governments in the 70s tried freezing prices. They tried having a basket of prices whose prices wouldn't go up. What happened? The retailers simply put up all their other prices. It doesn't work. And I'm torn between thinking that this is just a cheap gimmick on Ed Miliband's part, which is what I hope it is, or that he really believes that you can rig markets, fix markets in this way. I wish there was any politician, Conservative Party, Liberal Democrats, or Labour Party, who was brave enough to challenge this assertion that the energy market is dysfunctional. They are typically making profits of 5 or 6%. That's what Sainsbury's make. We don't expect a freeze on the price of groceries. If you were to wipe out the energy company's entire profit margin, so they were making no money at all, you'd of course destroy the industry, but were you to do that, that would be about £5 a week off the average household bill. There isn't such a big problem here as it's being pretended.
Well, you say that, Matthew.
I do.
It's all very well to talk about you can't interfere in markets. Of course, you shouldn't interfere in a working market. This is not a working market, and they are looting the pocket of ordinary people trying to pay their electricity bills.
The man at the very back there.
If the market is so rigged, how come our gas and electricity prices in the UK are lower than the EU average?
Yeah.
And why do the politicians keep saying this rather than just giving us back the £100 subsidy for all the wind farms that they want to put up?
Well, first of all,
there are two questions. You think that part of the problem is the 10%, whatever it is, that goes towards green energy?
Yeah, it's all very well hand-wringing and saying poor people shouldn't have such high bills, but you've applied £100 tax in the form of subsidies on our gas and electricity bills, which applies to everyone, whether you're poor or rich. Why not take it out of general taxation?
I'll come to you again. Sarah Churchwell.
Well, I think part of the problem is about evidence. We're getting these assertions, but it's not clear what the wholesale prices are that they're paying. It's not clear. They're saying that they make a profit of 5%, 5 to 6%, but they're not just energy suppliers. They're also making profits in other parts of their business. And it seems to me that a kind of a blind faith in the market is as objectionable as the idea that we can control international prices, which has been one of the objections that's been made to this idea. I think that we need to make a distinction between essential services and discretionary services. When people are vulnerable and they're actually going to be at risk of, as Diane's saying, of not being able to pay their prices and in extremis of actually dying, then somebody needs to do something. Whether price fixes are the answer, Matthew was right. I don't remember the price freezes of the 1970s, and if it doesn't work, then we need to try something else. But simply saying, oh, let's just bring in more competition and that will sort it out, that's demonstrably not the case.
Okay, you said the second row.
It's a very simple point, which is brought by the panel over here and just back there. We have the cheapest gas prices in Europe. We have the 4th cheapest electricity prices. The electricity, they are not ripping us off. It's funny, it's just a lie. And electricity is expensive. And it's a cost, but it's an international problem, and we cannot change that.
Okay, can you briefly answer that, Diana?
Our electricity prices may be relatively low compared to Europe, but people in this city and up and down the country, what people pay in Europe is not their problem. Their problem is how steeply prices are rising and how the big energy companies are abusing a rigged market. That's their problem.
It's just happening in Europe. The exact same thing.
The woman in the second row from the back. Then come to you, Adam. Yes, the woman there.
I'm not sure it's necessary to rig an entire market just to help a small minority who are poor, who are elderly, who cannot pay their bills. We should be concentrating on helping out that minority rather than messing up an entire market by price fixing.
Okay. Adam Afriyie.
Well, I think when anyone opens the envelope with the energy bill, one's always nervous. But I'm going to say something a bit controversial. Sorry about this, chaps. I actually think that Ed Miliband is right. I think he's right in his analysis of the problem. There is a problem with energy prices, but I also think he's completely wrong. It would be absolutely balmy to try and control the energy price. First, for some of the reasons that have already been given. First of all, as I know, I come from a business background, businesses will just raise the prices before, in anticipation of the government, of the Labour government. The second thing is that he can't possibly do it. You know, the wholesale price of gas and electricity is set by world markets. So what's he going to do What's he going to do if the wholesale price of gas and electricity goes... Well,
as a businessman, you know that these companies have already bought that. They buy that, they forward buy.
Yes.
So it's a sudden rise. It doesn't affect because they forward bought.
Absolutely. But if the world price goes up, in general, over whatever time frame, what is Ed Miliband going to do?
What are you going to do, Adam?
Is he going...
He's asking you what you're going to do. You have to you're going to do.
I've told him.
I listen politely. So what's he going to do? Is he going to just constantly pour money from the exchequer to try and hold the price down to consumers? It doesn't make any sense at all. And even if he did manage to achieve a £200 or £100 a year saving to consumers, that could be completely surpassed if we actually simply help the market to run smoothly. And I have to say, in this regard, the coalition government, I think, is doing a good job. They're looking at competition within the market so that any one of us here can look between many suppliers and try and find the lowest energy price. I think that's the way forward.
All right.
And I think it's going to work.
We've got a lot of questions to get through, so I'll just take one or two more points from the audience. You, sir, here. Yes, that's you.
I'm afraid markets do not quite work as Diane Abbott seems to think that they do. Markets only care about purchasing power. So if there are lots of people out there who do not have the necessary purchasing power for your product, the market will not supply them the product.
Oh,
so
people must freeze
I'm
to
actually
death.
quite surprised to see this level of attachment to genuine markets in Labour Party.
So people must freeze to death because the markets won't supply them?
No. So,
All right, the woman in green
market
there,
is not the solution.
And then come to you, Joe.
I do support what Diane's saying, because as a staff nurse, I do see patients coming in suffering from the cold, and that's pretty much more the reason why they've actually been admitted. It's that heat or eat syndrome, and when I go round into the communities, I physically see them huddled into the room. What we do have is the inevitable fact that the energy prices is going up, and it's likely to go up, and wages are going lower.
What do you make of the point that was made just beside you there, that the focus should be on the elderly and those with not enough money to pay their bills, rather than on the whole,
I think
the whole
by
consumer?
capping, probably by not be the best means, because by judging our mortgage interest rates didn't work. So therefore, it should be that by controlling the energy prices won't work either.
Okay.
But by certainly offering more help to the people that are vulnerable, but that help is not out there and not in time.
Joe Swinson, briefly, if you would.
The gentleman made the point about the roughly 9% of the energy bill that's as a result of government policies, and I think it picks up exactly in the point that the lady at the back made, which is about targeting help to the most vulnerable, because the vast majority of what is as a result of the government policy is actually going to help people who are vulnerable. Things like the warm home discount, which means that people in that difficult scenario, so they don't have to choose between heating and eating, are getting help with their bills, and indeed to roll out energy efficiency to cut everyone's energy bills. But there is a small part of that,
Well,
and I don't think...
That's a tiny part of it. I've got the figures here. It's £11 a year. It's
Yeah.
£47 a year. For various other things, home improvements, renewables, £30 a year.
3% is investment on renewable technology and green technology, and we need those green jobs for our economy, and we have to think of the long-term challenges we're facing, which is not just about getting the economy back on track, but it's also about the threat of climate change, and to address that, we do need to change the way that we generate our electricity, and it's important that that small part of the energy bills does go into tackling that
Thank you
real
very much.
threat.
You made the point. Thank you very much. Now, to comment on what's being said here tonight, you can tweet, you can text. Our hashtag is BBCQT. You can follow us at BBC Question Time. Texting, the number is 83981. The red button will allow you to follow other texts. And we'll take a question from Zach Ziola, please.
Should Britain have a referendum on the EU before the general election?
Should Britain have a referendum on the EU before the general election? This was a proposal that Adam Afriyie is putting before the House of Commons, to some dismay of many of his colleagues. But Diane Abbott, are you in favour of a referendum before the general election?
I'm certainly in favour of a referendum. I believe the Labour Party should...
That wasn't the question.
No, but let me just explain. The reason why... Because it's not yet our policy to support a referendum at all. The reason why a referendum is important, it's not because I'm anti-European. I'm pro-European. I was in Barcelona this summer, had a wonderful time. But the problem...
That is not being pro-European.
Exactly.
That's having a nice holiday.
Tourism is not the same thing.
But In the 90s, I was on the Treasury Select Committee, travelled all over Europe, Berlin, Paris, whatever, talking about a single currency. And what struck me then, and it remains my position, that Europe is an elite project, and the European elites don't want ordinary people to have the debate. And I think there's a democratic case for having the debate and having a referendum. I'm not sure about a referendum before the general election, but I think it's an interesting idea, and I think Adam is to be congratulated for bringing it forward.
Right. Would you like to see Ed Miliband, now that you're not on his front bench and can speak your mind at last, not that you ever stop, which is probably why you're no longer on the front bench. Would you like to see Labour put that in the manifesto for the next election?
A referendum?
Yes.
Yes, because I think there's a democratic case. It's not anti-European to allow the British people to debate and decide.
Yeah. OK. Jo Swinson.
Well, I think that we should have a referendum, but not before the general election. We should have a referendum when there is a significant change of powers between the UK and the rest of Europe, and that seems to be the sensible time at which to have that referendum. I think Adam's proposal for a referendum in 2014 is flawed on a range of grounds. I think it, first of all, takes no regard of the fact that we have a Scottish referendum coming up the month before that, and it's almost like the impact on that is not featured in his calculations. Maybe he's not that bothered about whether the United Kingdom actually continues in its current form. It seems to have no regard to the fact that this would be throwing a hand grenade into a European economy that is currently trying to recover from an incredibly difficult set of circumstances, which has a huge impact on British trade and British jobs. I mean, it seems that this proposal has really achieved two things. It's got Adam onto the front page of the Mail on Sunday, so it's succeeded in that objective. And the only other thing, and I have to congratulate him for this, perhaps the only time that the Conservative Party have ever managed to be united on Europe, united in disagreement with this particular proposal, and I think that is something which perhaps does deserve some real congratulations.
All right. Adam Afriyie.
Well, look, I believe that the British people need to have a say, and that 80% of the British people want a referendum, 80% of businesses want a referendum, more than half want it sooner rather than later, within the next year or two. So it's not particularly revolutionary for a backbench MP to suggest that the people have a referendum in 2014. You know, I think that people need their say, and from what the answers I'm already hearing here, you've got a political elite, a political class that for 40 years have kept saying, oh, it's not the right time, we've got to have lots of complicated things happening beforehand. 12 months, I can tell you, from negotiating in business, is plenty of time to negotiate, and if we set the date in October 2014, guess where the pressure is? The pressure is on the European Union leaders to come to Britain and say, my goodness, we've got to convince these people to stay in. They will have to come forward with proposals. I think it's the right thing to do. I believe it's the right thing to do, and I'd rather be on the side of the British people than the political elite that just wants to deny them a voice.
You got a letter today, didn't you? From 140 Tory MPs.
So I hear.
You've not actually read it. I'll read it to you if you like.
No, you're welcome.
Yeah, no, but you know what it says. Just says you're wrong. 140 of the 147 people who came in 2010. Yeah. Are you going to go on pressing for this referendum, and do you have any hope of getting it through? Or are you going to say, look, I had my moment to explain what I thought, but I'm now going to drop it?
Look, I come from a tough background. I was dragged up lovingly in Peckham, in South East London, council housing. I've had some big, tough challenges in my life. People say to me, oh, you can't achieve this. Well, I always push through, and I work as hard as I can. So if the political class is uniting, the establishment uniting, and say, no, a backbench MP cannot even have a say on this, then I think I'm prepared to fight. I'm prepared to fight all the way so the British people can have a say.
So you're not withdrawing it?
Well, clearly one has to listen to the parliamentary debate. Clearly, oh no, wait a second. Clearly one has to listen to what the politicians have to say. Clearly one has to listen and take soundings. But I am absolutely sure that the way to secure, for the Conservative Party, actually, if I'm honest about it, an election victory in 2015 is if we've had this referendum, we settled the question, we are settled as a nation, the incoming government must either remain in the EU or must come out, but the British people have decided.
And why, as a matter of interest, did you abstain in 2011 when 81 Tory MPs did call for a referendum?
No,
you weren't there then.
Well, I was there. I was standing there. I was in the debate. And I'll tell you why. Because I made a decision. I'm not a coalister. I'm not a coalitionist. Okay, I didn't believe in the coalition when it started. And I made a decision, though. The Conservatives are leading the coalition. I am a Conservative MP, been a Conservative for 25 years. I decided that I wasn't going to stand in the way of what a Conservative-led government wanted to do. So basically, I decided that I wasn't going to. There was a three-line whip. I defied it. I didn't vote for the government in that whip. So that's the way Parliament works. Either you vote against something or for something, or if you think that I actually think the European referendum motion was flawed, then you abstain. But I defied the whip, and I will continue to do so on this one if necessary.
Matthew Parris.
I've got to tell you, Adam, as a fellow Conservative, that nobody in the party is saying that you have no right to an opinion, and no one's saying you have no right to put forward a proposal. They're saying that your proposal is stark raving bonkers.
Well, to give the people a say, to have a referendum and give the people a say is bonkers. I don't think so.
We have a Prime Minister who says that if he is re-elected with a majority at the next election, he will renegotiate the terms of our membership of the European Union. He will bring back those renegotiated terms. He will put them to the country. If the country like them, we can vote yes. If we don't like them, we can vote no. We shall have something then to vote on. Now, in the middle of a European economic crisis with a coalition government, there wouldn't be a proposition to vote on. It's just the wrong time.
OK, you think it's bonkers?
Yeah.
All right. You, sir, on the gangway there, do you think it's bonkers? Yes.
I don't think it's bonkers. I think the issue will be that if we have a referendum and we vote to come out, we'll just have further referenda until the political elite get the answer that they want.
Which is what?
Which is to stay in.
Which is to say yes. OK. And you, sir, on the gangway here.
Do you not think that in the European elections next summer that we might have a referendum at that point?
I did think about that idea, but I think one has to be practical, and I think you need at least 12 months when something is passing through Parliament to actually say that there will be a referendum. And when it comes to the Scottish referendum, I've taken that fully into account. One can have a referendum on Scotland. Do Scotland want to be part of the United Kingdom? We have an answer to that, and then several weeks later, we have a referendum on membership of the European Union. One moment, just one moment. This is really important. Is that look, we've got a coalition government, okay, and we're settling our constitutional issues. We've had a vote, we had a referendum on AV, alternative voting. We've settled that the Lords are not going to be elected. We're having a referendum on the United Kingdom in terms of Scotland. Why on earth are we not sorting out the elephant in the room, which is our relationship with the European Union? I think it would be good for Britain.
Sarah Churchwell.
Well, Adam and I were reminiscing in the green room. The very first time, and in fact it's only the second time that we've met, but the first time that we met was on another panel program debating the European referendum, and it was, I think, 10 years ago. Yeah. And that debate doesn't seem to have moved on very much in that decade. And it seems to me, from the point of view of somebody who's, still comparatively recently arrived in this country, I've lived here for 14 years, that you just never are going to get away from this. You're going to have the damn referendum. Yeah. And the can keeps getting kicked down the road. However, I do take the point that a coalition government in the middle of an economic crisis is probably not the best time to do it. That said, it does seem like there's always an excuse. It's never a good time to have it. The thing that troubles me is that it seems to have become a shorthand for a foregone conclusion, which is that the vote will be to leave Europe. And I sincerely hope that that isn't the case. I think it's incredibly important that Britain remains part of the European Union, but you've got to sort this out. You can't keep going back and forth about what it is. You've just got to take the vote, and hopefully Britain will come to its senses and vote to stay in the European Union, and then you can, case closed, move on.
Adam was saying, well, the Europeans have got to come over here and explain why we should stay in. But what happens if they say, look, you're just so much trouble, vote against and go and leave us, and we'll be fine without you. Thank you very much.
Yes, the parallels with the Scottish referendum, some people would say. The woman at the very back there, yes.
I totally agree with Sarah Churchill, her phrase, I hope that England will come to its senses, the UK will come to its senses. However, I think there's a real grave danger, come to their senses will not happen as long as there isn't a really decent information campaign before any referendum. Yeah.
Do you want to see a referendum before the election? Do you want to see
I certainly don't want to see a referendum for a very long time. I think it's complete nonsense to bring it up at this time of a critical time within Europe. But I think, can I just say, people do not realise in this country, they never have an information campaign that shows them the advantages that they've had over an enormous number of years of being in the European Union.
The woman here, am I right? And then I come up to you.
I'm a teacher in a secondary school in England, and I'm particularly interested in what the government proposes to do to educate 18-year-olds who can vote on Europe, especially given that the new history national curriculum is increasingly Anglo-centric.
Okay. And the person over there on the right, on the left, I mean, rather. No, not you, sir, the man next to you, even though you've got a very persuasive wave. Person on your right. Yes.
I think it's actually quite presumptuous to say that it would be on the EU leaders to come and say to England why we should stay. I actually think it's the job of your party to tell me why on earth we should leave, because I think if you really look at facts, there's quite a lot of attractive things being part of the EU. If you look at postgraduate study in this country, it's talking about £10,000 to £15,000. Whereas in Scandinavia, it's completely free. In Holland, it's £1,500. Why on earth would you want to leave unless it's the typically uncharitable Tory line of we don't want to bail out Greece?
How would you vote, Adam, if your referendum came about next year? How would you vote? Just in or out?
Well, like Michael Gove, if we had the referendum today, like Michael Gove, I would vote to come out. But 12 months from now, when we've had some renegotiations and there's a different offer on the table, then it may be a different situation. But I just want to correct something. The Conservative Party is completely united behind the idea of having a referendum. I have a difference on timing. And the second thing is the Conservative Party doesn't have a view about whether we should come out or stay in. And this is something that the British public must decide. And as soon as the campaign starts, there will be people arguing to stay in. All the information that we require from the various campaigns will be available, and there will be people who are arguing to come out. The point is to have it out and to have our country then united either within Europe or united because we're coming out of the European Union.
I'm going to move on to another question. I know there are many people still with views on that, but let's go on to another question because we're nearly halfway through. Phil Porter, please. Phil Porter.
The OECD Skills Survey has shown our young adults perform poorly in comparison with those of other countries. Where have we gone wrong?
This is the figures that came out of a long list of 24 countries, with England, not Scotland and Wales, England at number 19 on literacy and number 21 on numeracy of 16 to 24-year-olds. You're in the teaching business, Sarah Churchwell. What do you think's gone wrong?
Well, as I said a moment ago, I arrived here 14 years ago, and I've been teaching literature ever since. And there's no question in my mind that literacy has dramatically declined. And I see it every day. So these results come as absolutely no surprise to me. And my colleagues who work in maths and sciences have seen similar problems with numeracy. So this is clearly happening. As far as what's gone wrong, my own feeling is that well, now I'm going to say something that's going to maybe really shock everybody, but I'm not sure that I believe in a national curriculum, actually. I don't come from a background of a national curriculum, and I'm not sure that one individual or even one cabinet can sit down and decide what is the best way to teach everybody across a nation. And I actually think that the results that you know are comparing better with the UK are often from places that have more flexible teaching options.
Well, except that America, where you do come from, is below England on these figures. Nobody mentioned that. They all went on about Finland being way up at the top. But United States is bottom of numeracy and third bottom on literacy.
Absolutely. Look, the United States. Well, look, the United States is currently, its government has shut down. Nothing is working there. I mean, the United States is clearly not a test example, and I was not in any way suggesting that it's currently working. But you know, as far as what can fix this, you know, I think that you have to let. I do believe that you have to let teachers teach. I think you have to trust that they can do their jobs. I think that you need to stop interfering with them and trying to tweak everything every time.
So you're against testing, you're against
obviously one must
testing,
test, but I think you
have
to do some testing, obviously, but yeah, I don't think they're constantly being taught to the test. It creates affirmative teaching where they only know the answers to the test. They're actually not learning the skills that they need in order to actually understand the subject. And it is a waste of everything.
Matthew Parris, where have we gone wrong, was the question.
I'm not sure that we have. I'm not sure there's been a substantial decline in literacy.
Well, you should come to my classroom and you read the essays that I've read over the last 14 years, and you will find a substantial, demonstrable decline in literacy. I'm sorry, you're simply wrong.
I was a Member of Parliament for about 7 years, yet many decades ago. And I must say that the most illiterate letters often came from my more elderly constituents. I'm not sure that we've ever been that brilliant at literacy or numeracy in the United Kingdom. I think perhaps...
We've always been crap, so it's okay.
I think perhaps that children learn the skills that they think they're going to need, and there may be other skills now which children are learning, and perhaps they're not as fluent in the classics.
So it doesn't matter, literacy and numeracy don't matter, really?
I think you need to read and write, and beyond that, and do a little bit of adding up, but you can do it on your mobile phone these days.
Wow.
I think beyond that, people will teach themselves the skills that they need. Okay. I never learnt very much at school anyway.
Except obviously to read and write.
Yeah.
I don't know, how's your numeracy? Poor,
medium,
probably.
medium.
You, sir?
Well, Matthew, you just picked up on people can learn on the mobile phone, but it's actually through things with text speak and various things like that, and internet, anagrams and stuff like that, that literacy is devolving within the UK. So it's no surprise, really, is it, when people are talking in abbreviated forms that people can't spell properly and can't articulate themselves efficiently.
But Finland, Japan, Korea, they all have mobile phones. They all do exactly the same thing, don't they?
They do. They do.
Why are they number 1, 2 and 3 at the top of the list?
Because they obviously focus on their own language as well.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't just look at the devolved grammar that a lot of youngsters are using these days.
That they just naturally know how to speak their own language perfectly. It doesn't
Maybe they're easier languages.
Yeah, that must be it.
In the third row, you, sir.
At my old school, students performed badly because the teachers didn't love the subject. What they did love was the paycheck.
Really?
Really?
Ooh, yeah.
You have to give the name and address of the school to the teachers here.
I had no idea teachers were that well paid.
No. OK, you send the bang in the centre there in the sort of red checked shirt on. Yeah.
Quite a few of these countries at the top of the OECD charts have a much later starting age for schools. Finland, I believe, is 6 or 7. Do the panel think that would help in the UK?
Help. That's a good point. We'll keep, and somebody thrust their hand up as they heard that being said. The woman there in the second row from the back.
I think part of the problem maybe in our primary schools today really is maybe our schools are trying to juggle too many subjects. There's such a focus on giving a very rounded syllabus of focusing on the sciences and some of the given a foundation knowledge of foreign languages. I think maybe there should be a greater focus on getting the kids to know the basics of English grammar, rather than trying to put too many things in their heads when they do not know the basics of their own language.
Diane Abbott, what do you think's gone wrong?
Well, this
if anything has.
This didn't happen overnight. And if you're going to look to the root of the problem, it obviously, parts of it emerged when you had a Labour government. Now, we did some fantastic things in education, investment in higher education, investment in schools and so on. But I think perhaps that the emphasis which said that 50% of the education population has to go to university perhaps skewed the debate to university and the sort of child that can get to university at the expense of basic skills and crafts and just real skills, not just reading and writing, but real skills. And we are talking now as a party about redressing that and focusing on the people who aren't necessarily going to university but should know valuable skills. I think we need a reset on education policy. University, I mean, it's a funny thing to say in a university town. University will always be absolutely the right thing for a great many people, and we want as many people who can benefit to go there, but we need a reset and a focus on basic skills.
Okay. Of course, Joe Swinson, these figures don't apply to you, do they? Because they don't include Scotland.
No, apparently the Scottish government didn't want to pay to be part of the study, but which...
You have to pay to be part of the study, to put yourself at number 20, 19 and 21 of 24, do you?
But, to get the data gathered, and I think it is useful to be able to understand where we are against other countries. You know, we are competing in a global economy, and this is incredibly important. And, I mean, Diane says the Labour government did some good things, but, you know, Tony Blair did promise his priority was going to be education, education, education. And these figures are from children that started their education between 1998 and 2007.
No,
and it is a pretty damning indictment to be at the bottom of those tables for literacy and numeracy.
I'm a London MP. I have 5 brand new secondary schools in my constituency, and the results of London children, because we actually put some focus on London children, have shot up. I'm not saying, and I've never said everything the Labour government, Tony Blair, God knows, did was perfect, but we did some great things in education, and it's not fair to the teachers who worked so hard in that period to say something different.
Well, I'm saying that we need to be incredibly worried, and you know, I think Matthew's perhaps a little bit complacent. I think we need to be incredibly worried because literacy and numeracy are the basic skills. You're going to find it really hard to get a job if you don't have basic literacy and numeracy. And it's not good enough for us to say that we've not been good at this traditionally, or that perhaps things are going to be okay, and in some parts of the country they're fine. We are letting those young people down, and that's why it's important that we are raising the age at which young people have to learn to 18 and making them have to continue their maths and their English in some form until that age. But we also need to make sure that the young people that have been failed, those who are in that 16 to 24 cohort at the moment, and some of whom are finding it very difficult to get a job, sometimes because of the lack of these skills, that they get the extra support they need. And that's why I think the new traineeship model that the government is undertaking is absolutely vital to plug the gap in those skills.
It's to support those young people that you did away with the educational maintenance allowance. To support them, was that what it was about?
Well, I think what we're doing is making sure that those skills are ones that can be developed with young people, that they can get the skills they need to then get on and get a job, which they're going to find difficult without literacy and numeracy.
And of course, Diane, you didn't show much confidence in state education yourself. It's well known you sent your children to private schools.
Yes, but I would say this. My son is now 22. When I had to decide on a secondary school, Labour had just come into office. If I had to make the same decision again, thanks to the investment in secondary schools in Hackney over the 13 years of Labour government, I would happily send him to a range of schools in Hackney, including Mossbourne, which was led by the very charismatic current Chief Inspector of Education, who was a Hackney head.
Do we have teachers here who'd like just to comment on this? Are you a teacher? You've spoken already tonight. You haven't? All right, fire away then, and then I come down. Are you a teacher too?
I trained in East London to be a teacher and was really shocked at the poverty that a lot of children are experiencing. And I think actually a more shocking statistic is that to be a child in this country is very bad. And I think the root cause is actually a lot of children have a lot of other worries apart from learning to read. When they're at home, they're worried about food, they're worried that they're sharing a bedroom with 3 other siblings. So there are basic care issues that I really didn't think existed.
Rather than the education system
yeah, because
itself.
Diane's right. You see in London a massive transformation of education, but you're still facing chronic inequality when you're in the shadow of Canary Wharf.
Point taken. Adam Afriyie.
I think Diane's point was incorrect, actually. She was talking about the educational maintenance allowance, which no longer exists. Yeah. But that was also in play during this whole study. So it was there because this was Labour's period. People studying between 98 and 2007. But the point I wanted to make was this, is that the other observation is that actually we were moving down. At that point, through that period, we were moving downwards. So it's not just about where we were actually moving backwards. And I think part of it was that we were kind of dumbing down the exam system. It's no criticism of teachers or of pupils. I mean, yeah, they do the best that they can. But there was this whole feeling that everybody must get a higher grade. So there was this grade inflation. And I think, you know, Michael Gove is doing, I'm just saying this, I know that he's not very popular with teachers. I know that, but he's doing some fantastic work in terms of making the exam system robust so that when you leave school, you know that the grades that you've got will be recognised around the whole world. And with the English baccalaureate, it's now very telling that the percentage of people who are taking the baccalaureate, it fell to about 25% under the Labour government. It's already back up to about 50%. Something good is happening. I hope it continues.
All right. Matthew, just briefly. And I'll take a couple more points. I'll come to you.
Just very brief observations. Sarah said, and I can't contradict her, that she's noticed the standard of writing of your students has gone down a lot in the last, did you say 19 years?
14.
Last 14 years. Well, of course, during the last 14 years, there's been a huge increase in the proportion of school leavers who go on to university. And I wonder whether part of the explanation may simply be a drop in the calibre of your students.
No, I actually don't think that it is. And I think that part of the issue here, because first of all, we're seeing it across, I mean, I obviously am in contact with other people at other universities, we're seeing it across the board. What I think is the issue, and I would agree with the gentleman who asked about children going to school older. I think that that's probably a good idea. I think they're starting way too young. I think that the testing culture has absolutely proven to be detrimental. It is not actually teaching them what they need to learn. And the other issues that the gentleman there was raising about poverty and the other anxieties and concerns that children have, of course, these are all things that we need to deal with as a society. But as Joe said, these are absolutely key skills without which you cannot get forward in life. And we have to make a priority of making sure that the skills are taught. And I really do believe we have to trust teachers to be, and stop interfering with them all the time. Just let them do what they do, but it's really important.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go on because we've got lots of more questions to have. To get through, Matt Webb, I'd like to have a question from you. Matt Webb, please.
Will the coalition and shadow cabinet appointments in this week's reshuffles really make any difference to UK politics, or is it simply just window dressing?
Is it just window dressing, dropping Diane Abbott, for instance? Matthew Parris, you're the expert on the machinations of politics as an outside observer now. What do you say?
I can give you a very short answer. It's simply just window dressing. I have nothing more to say. It is just window dressing.
Why did he want to window dress Diane Abbott out of his front bench?
We're always sorry when a star falls from the firmament in this case. No, it's mostly an exercise in encouraging people within the party to believe that there is a hope for them, that things may change, that things are moving up there in the stratosphere. Look, so-and-so's got a job, maybe you'll get a job. There's an awful lot of that going on, but really a change in the identities of a small number of junior ministers or junior spokesmen makes absolutely no difference to the overall direction of politics.
Diane Abbott.
Well, I was a curtain, or a bit of a curtain, that's removed from a window. What I would say...
A bit of a what?
A bit of curtain. A bit of curtain.
Now, I've thought of you of many things. I've never thought of you as a bit of curtain before. So.
What I would say, because I've never been on the front bench before, I've never been sacked before, I've never been involved in a reshuffle before. And what struck me is how reshuffles leave most people really unhappy. All the people that didn't get promoted, all the people that didn't get the right job. So you have to feel a little bit sorry for Ed, because most of the people in a reshuffle are unhappy. Does it make a difference? I think, you know, it's probably correct to say it doesn't. But what I would say is I understand that one of the reasons that I got chopped was because I came out publicly and said we shouldn't bomb Syria. And I did it. I did it because Ed Miliband was wobbling at that point. And they brought us back early because they wanted to bomb Damascus that weekend. I believe that would have dragged us into a civil war in Syria where there are no good guys. Syrians would have died. And if I got the push because I refused to vote for bombing Syria, well, I tell you, I would do the same thing over and over again.
But they didn't have... But Labour's motion didn't ask for permission to bomb Syria.
No, but...
why you weren't asked to vote for it?
You know how it works. What would have happened was we could have put forward a motion, it would have fallen, and then the leadership from my party would say, oh, well, we have to vote with the government now. That route was blocked off for the leadership, and then the Tory motion fell.
All right. Joe Swinson.
Which, by the way, also didn't give permission for bombing Syria, I think.
Joe Swinson.
I mean, does it make any difference?
Window dressing.
I don't think it necessarily will be earth-shattering, but clearly, every so often, party leaders do have to, in terms of the management of what they're trying to do, in the same way that any organisation does, has to consider whether they have the right people in the right jobs doing well. Now, in politics, isn't your ideal kind of, textbook management in terms of doing human resources? There's not enough continuing personal development or proper appraisal systems where people can be helped work out what they could do better. It's a little bit chuck people in at the deep end and see if they sink or swim.
Was putting Norman Baker in the Home Office, which was Liberal Democrats' decision, a man who believes the security forces covered up the murder of David Kelly, the weapons inspector, was that just throwing Norman Baker in the deep end? I mean, what was all that
I think
about?
Norman Baker's been a fantastic minister over the past 3 years.
But he believes the security services, which he's now in part of managing, was responsible for a cover-up about the murder of a senior government official.
I mean, say what you like about Norman Baker, you certainly can't say he's not prepared to challenge received wisdom. And now sometimes that leads to a huge amount of controversy. But on a whole range of other issues, Norman Baker has been, standing up. He was putting in freedom of information requests, which were part of the way the whole MP's expenses scandal was uncovered in the first place. I think Norman's done a wonderful job as a minister. He will do an excellent job in the Home Office. He is a very strong supporter of civil liberties. And, if you have me back on this programme in a year's time, we'll be able to discuss how good a minister he's been in that role in the past year.
And is it true Theresa May is very, very unhappy?
Well, I don't know the specifics of that, but, it's not the job of the Liberal Democrats in government to make Theresa May happy.
What would the specifics be?
I haven't had a conversation with Theresa to ask her whether she's happy, but as I say, it's not our job to make her happy.
But it's not the Liberal Democrats' job in a coalition to keep the Tories happy.
No, it's our job to make sure we get as many Liberal Democrat policies in the government enacted using the votes that people gave to us at last general election. And putting someone with strong civil liberties credentials into the Home Office, I think is a pretty good way of achieving that.
Because you don't think those credentials are there at the moment?
Well, I certainly think that it's useful to strengthen them at every opportunity. I'm a big fan of civil liberties, and I think it's important that we have that well represented in the Home Office.
You sit up there, in the middle. Yeah.
Joe Swinson was saying that a change of this nature should be done on ability and it should be a meritocratic decision, but it strikes me from some of Ed Miliband's decisions that rather than on meritocracy and ability, they're more on pleasing Len McCluskey and ticking that union box.
Okay. No, I mean, I have to say... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, that's absurd. The headline promotion of Ed's reshuffle was a wonderful guy called Tristram Hunt. Is he a left-winger? No, he's not. I mean, this idea that it was all about left versus right is absurd.
All right. And the man in red there at the back.
I used to work in the civil service, working for ministers for all of the three parties, and have experienced the impact of ministerial reshuffles. It causes a huge amount of disruption within government. Now, the Institute for Government and the Public Administration Select Committee have published reports on the impact of those reshuffles. Because of the regular reshuffles that have happened, particularly at the end of the Labour administration, Diane, the impacts that it had was it meant that none of your politicians were able to gain any expertise in their policy areas, and unfortunately each of the different policy areas in their own way were captured by very wealthy vested interests.
So you think people should stay in post longer, really? And
I would like to see more ministers and more...
Adam Afriyie, what do you say to that?
I think the Prime Minister's done an absolutely fantastic job. He's kept many... No, I think so.
I thought you wanted to replace him.
No, not back to that old one.
Is that...
You get one newspaper story and everyone thinks you're running for leadership. It's a load of nonsense. Basically, I support the Prime Minister and I hope he's there for 1,000 years. But anyway, as I was saying... But anyway, as I was saying, I think the Prime Minister's done a great job because he's kept stability in those positions. Some people have been in position now for 3.5, heading on towards 4 years, and I think that's a good thing. In terms of the reshuffles, there are a lot of career politicians. Everyone wants to get up the slippery pole, and nobody wants to come down. But a bit like share prices, careers go up and careers go down. And what I would say is that actually, People returning to the back benches, they're going to be valued. They've got good experience and they'll be able to help. And people moving from the back benches to the front benches, they're going to add tremendous value. It's a win-win situation. The Prime Minister is right. It's a vast improvement.
Okay. And you didn't mention Michael Gove. It's the first time you haven't tonight. Sarah Churchwell.
I quite agree with the gentleman in the back. I've never understood the concept of first of all, I don't know why it's a reshuffle, because that seems redundant. Surely shuffle is adequate to the concept. But
There speaks a professor. Really.
Exactly. I deal with words. And that's exactly what I'm going to pick up on. The idea of a shuffle is the idea of disorder. It's a creation of randomness and disorder. That's what a shuffling of cards is. And I don't want a government that throws up the cards and sees how they land. I actually want a government that's playing a hand, that has a strategic idea of where it's trying to go. I don't understand why expertise, experience, and skills are not what is being emphasized here. I have never understood why the man in charge of the economy is somebody who got a degree in modern history. I don't understand that. No, I genuinely don't understand that. Certainly the evidence suggests he doesn't understand much about history either, so I'm not sure that we should be, giving him any control over that. But the fact is that I would like to hear a conversation, not about, I mean, of course it's great that there are more women now in leadership roles. That's a nice outcome. That's a good thing. But I want to know if those women are actually good at the jobs in which they've been put. And that is the matter that we need to hear about. And we never hear about what their skills are, what their experience is that makes them appropriate for the position that they have just been put in.
Okay. Thank you very much. A question now from Patrick Kirkham, please. Patrick Kirkham.
Has the publication of articles in The Guardian about GCHQ damaged national security?
This is a very important argument. The chief of MI5, Andrew Parker, made a speech this week in which he said enormous damage was done to the pursuit of terrorists, information published in the newspapers, in The Guardian in particular, handing the advantage to the terrorists, the gift they need to evade us and strike us at will. Has that publication damaged national security? Jo Swinson.
Well, I mean, understandably, the head of MI5 is going to make the case that he has done. And I think we do need to recognise that there are some things that MI5 and other agencies do to keep us all safe that do need to be kept secret. But I think there is a balance also to be struck in recognising that there needs to be some accountability, and we are able to do that in some ways through Parliament and through government for these services, and that to a degree the press within our country has always also played a role in that. So I don't think it would be fair to say that always publishing anything that is leaked is always the wrong thing for a newspaper to do.
But what about these publications of these leaks about GCHQ and the way that it tapped into terrorist and other communications?
Well, I mean, as I say, I can understand why the head of MI5 is making that case.
Is he right or wrong?
Well, I mean, I think that it's probably the case that it would have been better in terms of our national security had that not all been published. But equally, I think it's worth recognising the Guardian didn't publish everything that they were given. It wasn't just entirely indiscriminate like some of the things we've seen on WikiLeaks and so on, where just thousands and thousands of pages have all been published all at once. So I think we do need to take great care about these particular issues. But I think that there can be a legitimate role for newspapers and in a free press, and it's important that there is accountability and transparency of what the security services do on our behalf as well.
Okay.
Oh, do stop being so judicious, Jo. I was not 500 yards from here many years ago. I was actually interviewed for a job in British intelligence, and it gets worse. They offered me a job.
Have you been a spy all this time?
Yeah, now we're very afraid.
They were the only people, I think, who knew anything about me who hadn't realised that I was gay.
Is that a ban to being in intelligence? No.
Well, it would have certainly would have been in 1973. Yes.
Did you proffer yourself for this job, or did they just come along and say, "Hey, we'd like to"?
You must
have proffered yourself.
Just like in the spy novels, one is approached by a don whom one has never met before and asked whether one would be interested in this rather specialised branch of work. Yes, so I've always taken our intelligence services utterances with a pinch of salt, and I take this one with a pinch of salt. On the other hand, The Guardian's absurd grandstanding is profoundly irritating. I think that if you're...
What grandstanding, for those of us who don't read it every day?
Oh, they're fighting a magnificent battle for human freedom by releasing...
You don't believe that?
No, I certainly don't, and I think a lot of the stuff that Snowden has released shouldn't have been released. If you're against invading Iraq, and I was, if you're against invading Afghanistan, as I was, Syria, as I am, even doubtful about Libya, you have to have an answer to the question, how should the nation's security be protected? And if that isn't by having a good, well-staffed and well-resourced intelligence service which is able to find things out and to keep secrets, then I don't know what the answer is.
But you've shifted a bit. You were accusing her of being pompous and judicial and all that, and now you're saying exactly the same thing yourself, that it is very important.
It is very important, yes, and I don't think that The Guardian have been right in what they've done. You can't simply release bucket loads of state secrets and know which will be damaging to security and which won't.
Sarah Churchwell.
I don't think... I have yet to see any evidence, however, that these leaked documents have indeed brought harm to anyone. I haven't seen any evidence of that. Well, that somebody was harmed as a result of these revelations. I mean, we haven't yet seen that. What we have seen is a series of organizations in America and here which are making it very clear that their ideas about their own power and their insistence on secrecy as the way that they control things is under massive threat. It is being transformed, and they are going to have to figure out more flexible ways of dealing with the world in which we all live, with the digital world. I think that the idea that there can be a role for the free press in this, I find frankly worrying. There has to be a role for the free press in this, because the free press is what holds government to account. These guys have not been held to account, and simply shouting at us that this is a question of national security, how do I know that? You know, we're being asked to trust people who have proven themselves to be untrustworthy.
Okay. The man in the middle there with spectacles, you sir.
I believe The Guardian should be prosecuted on the Official Secrets Act. And if the Crown Prosecution Service doesn't do this, I would like them to tell us why.
Diane Abbott.
Well, of course, there's always a defence under the Official Secrets Act of the public interest. If we're talking about the Snowden revelations, not WikiLeaks, which is just a dump of information, we're talking about the Snowden revelations, I actually think it's wrong for the head of MI5 to step out of the shadows, assert that this has damaged national security, and step back into the shadows. He can't be challenged, he can't prove it. We know, whatever we think of Edward Snowden, or The Guardian for that matter, that they've been very careful about what they've published. And the truth is, although I've always vaguely, as a woman of the left, I've always vaguely assumed my phone was tapped, and they must have listened to some very boring conversations about shopping and boys years ago. But nobody knew, actually, that the state in America and here was able to monitor your every telephone communication, your every activity on email. And nobody knew that companies like Google had engaged with backdoor deals with the state. We didn't know these things, and I believe we're entitled to know them. Exactly. I think the way the head of MI5 intervening is not, I think it's shouldn't happen in a democratic society. We need a debate between the public and politicians, but on balance, I believe the stuff printed in The Guardian, which shows us the extent of surveillance, a leviathan
and how
surveillance,
much they exceeded their authority.
And that they exceeded their authority, it seems to me, on balance, what The Guardian and Edward Snowden have done was in the public interest.
Here, here.
Thank you very much. We have to stop. Our hour is up, I'm afraid. Sorry to those of you who still have your hands up. Yes, question time always passes speedily. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to be in Basingstoke next week, and we do have the person that was mentioned by Diane Abbott, Labour's new Shadow Education Secretary, Tristram Hunt, on the panel. The week after that, we're going to be in Liverpool. So remember those two places, Basingstoke and Liverpool. If you can come to either programme to take part and put questions and argue with our panel, our website is the best place to go to. The address is there on the screen, or you can call 0330 123 9888. If you've been listening to this on Radio 5 Live, the debate continues now on Question Time, Extra Time. In the meantime, my thanks to our panel here, Thanks to all of you who came to Cambridge to take part. Until next Thursday from the Guildhall here in Cambridge. Good night.
Homes Under the Hammer expert Martin Roberts speculates on the Help to Buy scheme with This Week next on BBC One.